we got some fucking okay. Let's look at what we got looking for us. Black Knight satellite. Okay, knocking inside space capsule. Tabby's star dimming. The Hezbollah light. Jellyfish UFO. Undetected Neos. Uh, One Eye Oumuamua. Lost Cosmonaut recordings. Wait, Apollo 10 unexplained music. Okay, we got some interesting things here, I think. Let's start it.
The Black Knight satellite. In 1899, the famous inventor Nikola Tesla was conducting radio experiments when he intercepted a signal that frightened him. It was a rhythmic and repeating sound that was unlike any natural electrical storm from Earth. He announced that these regular signals must be coming from an intelligent outside source, and he suspected inhabitants of Mars were trying to make contact. This marked the beginning of the Black Knight satellite story. According to this theory, there is a mysterious...
This is the only beginning? Okay, it all started with Nikola Tesla. All right.
Object of extraterrestrial origin that has been circling the Earth for 13,000 years. It sits...
Wait. You mean to tell me there's an object circling the Earth, right? It's not naturally made. And it's not man-made. We've been being watched this whole time for 13,000 years. We've been being watched. Okay.
It's in a near polar orbit, which means it travels in a path.
Hey, they probably saw the birth of Jesus Christ and the death. I wonder what they thought of that. I wonder what they thought of like World War One, the Vietnam War, or oh, that's just the video. I'm looking at this thing here, which coincidentally lies right below where my webcam is. So it thought it was a wire sticking out from my webcam for some reason. But yeah, 13,000 years watching us. Okay.
That allows it to scan every single inch of our planet. The most unsettling part is that this intruder was reportedly lurking there long before humans had the technology to launch their own rockets. The mystery deepened in the 1920s when amateur radio operators started picking up what are called long-delayed echoes. They would send a signal out and receive an echo seconds later, which was far too long to be a normal bounce off the atmosphere. Decades later, in 1973, a Scottish writer named Duncan Lunan analyzed these strange echoes and created a chart based on the timing. To his shock, the data formed a picture that looked like a star map pointing to a system called Epsilon Bootis. He suggested the signals were messages from an ancient alien probe that had been parking near our moon for thousands of years. The tension then reached a breaking point during the Cold War in the 1950s and 60s.
Okay.
Newspapers reported that the US Navy had detected a dark object floating in orbit. This was terrifying because at that time, neither the United States nor the Soviet Union admitted to owning it. Then came the most convincing evidence of all in 1998 during a space shuttle mission. The crew of the Endeavour took high-resolution photographs of a pitch-black twisted object floating above the clouds. For many people, this was the final proof that the Black Knight was real, and it was right on our doorstep. However, the true explanation for these events is much less scary. It turns out the Black Knight legend is just a jumble of completely unrelated stories that people chopped up and stirred together on the internet. Nikola Tesla was likely hearing natural signals from pulsars, which are fast-spinning stars that were not discovered until years later, or he was just hearing interference from Earth. Duncan Lunan later admitted he made big mistakes in his star map drawing and retracted his theory, calling it unscientific. The dark object from the 1960s was identified as the remains of an Air Force satellite that had gone astray. Finally, that terrifying photo from 1998 is not an alien ship at all. It is actually a thermal blanket. During a spacewalk, astronaut Jerry Ross accidentally lost his grip on a fabric cover used to protect equipment, knocking inside space capsule.
So it's not real. Okay. You're just throwing me for a loop now. Is that it? You're just okay. I'm over here believing, oh, that's crazy. We have an ancient alien satellite that's been watching us for 13 years, watched the birth of Jesus Christ and World War One and everything. But it's not even, it's just a thermal blanket and jumbled stories. Yeah, all right.
In 2003, during his first solo spaceflight, Yang Liwei said he heard knocking inside his capsule, like tapping on metal with a wooden hammer, clear enough to
Okay.
make him stop and listen. But he couldn't tell whether it came from inside the craft or from outside. He looked out through the porthole and saw nothing that explained it. Back on Earth, he tried to reproduce the sound so engineers could identify it, but couldn't make it happen again. The story didn't stay isolated either. Chinese reports later said similar knocking was heard again on Shenzhou 6 and Shenzhou 7, with crews likewise unable to point to a cause. Over time, Yang warned later astronauts so they wouldn't panic. The main theories include expansion and contraction as the vehicle cycles through temperature extremes, small vibrations from onboard systems, or minor impacts or mechanical interactions that transmit through the hull and become audible inside. However, we don't have a 100% confirmed cause yet. Tabby's star dimming.
Okay.
About 1,470 light-years away from Earth, there's a star that has broken every rule in the book and baffled astronomers more than almost any other object in the sky. It's also known as the WTF star. Usually, when
Okay.
astronomers hunt for planets, they look for tiny dips in a star's brightness as a planet passes in front of it. Even a massive planet like Jupiter would only block about 1% of a star's light, but Tabby's star is different. The light from this star plummeted by a massive 22%. That is not a planet. For a shadow that big to appear, something colossal must be blocking the view, something that covers up to half the width of the star itself. What makes this even more disturbing is that there is no rhythm to it, and planets orbit like clockwork, passing by at regular intervals. After staying quiet for a long time, the star suddenly began to dim erratically in 2017, with events given mysterious names like Elsie, Celeste, and Skara Brae. It looked less like a natural orbit, and more like something was being constructed or destroyed around the star. This behavior was so strange that scientists began to consider a theory that usually belongs in science fiction, an alien megastructure. The idea was that an advanced civilization might be building a Dyson swarm, which is a massive shell of solar collectors designed to wrap around a star and
Okay.
harvest its energy. The theory suggested we were watching the star being slowly enclosed and choked off by an artificial machine of impossible size. If it wasn't aliens, the other explanations were just as violent. Some researchers proposed that the star was a cosmic graveyard that had eaten a planet alive. According to this theory, a planet fell into the star and was ripped apart, leaving behind a chaotic cloud of shattered debris and broken moons swirling around the stellar surface. Others thought it
Okay.
might be a massive swarm of disintegrating comets that were being dragged to their death, creating a thick veil of gas and rocks. The mystery was so intense that the SETI Institute pointed their radio telescopes at the star to listen for signals, and other teams hunted for laser beams that might be used by extraterrestrials to communicate. However, the likely explanation says something different. By analyzing the light during the dimming events, scientists realized that blue light was being blocked more than red light. If a solid alien structure were there, it would block all colors equally. The fact that red light could get through meant the object was semi-transparent. The terrifying megastructure is likely dust. It appears that a massive cloud of fine dust, perhaps the pulverized remains of comets or a destroyed moon, is circling the star, acting like a dirty window that dims the light in random, messy patterns. The
Okay.
Hessdalen Lights. Imagine walking through a quiet, dark valley in rural Norway when suddenly a bright orb of light appears out of nowhere. It isn't a plane and it isn't a star. It floats silently above the ground, sometimes hovering in mid-air as if it is watching you, and other times shooting across the sky at enormous speeds. These are the Hessdalen Lights, a phenomenon that has been haunting a 7.5-mile stretch of the Hessdalen Valley since the 1930s. The mystery became terrifyingly active between 1981 and 1984. During this time, these strange lights were invading the valley up to 20 times every single week. It got so intense that tourists started flocking there just to spend the night, hoping to see them. Scientists eventually moved in to investigate, and in the late 90s, a group of students and engineers actually recorded a glowing pyramid shape that was bouncing up and down in the darkness. They even set up an
Okay.
automatic station to watch the valley 24/7. For years, several theories popped up on what was causing all of this. One of them suggested the valley itself was a giant battery waiting to release its energy. The idea was that the two sides of the valley acted like the positive and negative ends of a battery, while the river running through the bottom acted as the fluid that connected them. As gas bubbles rose from the river, they got electrically charged and produced light. Scientists also found that dust from mining in the area contains special chemicals that can spontaneously catch fire in the air, meaning the mysterious floating orbs could have been clouds of burning dust. Still, there's no 100% confirmed explanation for this phenomenon, and the debate's still ongoing. The
Okay.
glowing
Hold on. Has Dolan lights. Oh, look at this. Okay. Yeah. Is there a video? Let's look. What's this?
but often these sightings can't be proven in the first place.
I'm just gonna mute this. Is that a recording of it? Me, that's freaky. I don't know if I can say. I mean, it could be fire. I mean, fire does burn a different color when it's introduced to different uh um materials. Interesting.
Jellyfish, UFO. On September 20th, 1977, in Petrozavodsk, witnesses saw a bright flare in the dark sky emit thin shafts of light downward, described as
Okay.
luminous threads. Reports said the glow spread into a jellyfish-like shape before the rays stopped. The shape became a bright semicircle, and it moved away. The display over the city was commonly described as lasting 10 to 15 minutes. The incident was not confined to one city. Reports came from a wide area, from Northern Europe to the Soviet Far East. The witnesses also came from varied roles: paramedics, on-duty police, military personnel, airport staff, and at least one amateur astronomer. By 30
Okay.
December 1978, Soviet researchers reported collecting 85 accounts, some with drawings. Several reports were more structured than a simple streak. There were also aircraft reports. A Tu-154 crew reported a luminous sphere around 7.5-mile altitude, and passengers on another flight described watching a bright object for about half an hour from cruising altitude. Afterward, some sources claimed follow-on effects: unusual glow over water, plant and water, bloom activity, and malfunctions in electronic devices that later returned to normal. The scale of
Interesting.
reports drew official attention. Government officials in northern European countries contacted the Soviet Academy of Sciences, asking whether the event could be related to weapons testing and whether it might pose environmental risk. Inside
Okay.
the USSR, a preliminary report concluded that the available information did not allow a satisfactory explanation. Explanations remained contested, and early suggestions included a meteorite fall and later auroral activity, but critics argued the reported brightness and geometry did not fit typical aurora descriptions. The most common attribution became the launch of the Soviet satellite Cosmos 955 from Plesetsk, framed as high-altitude engine, and plume effects viewed at an angle. Later, authors pointed to similar space jellyfish displays associated with launches near dawn or dusk, but objections persisted, especially where witness-reported motion seemed inconsistent with the launch direction or timing. A later attempt to reconcile reports proposed an unusual combination of factors, including geomagnetic disturbance, and another line of discussion linked some effects to an unsuccessful ballistic missile test in the same region around that period. Undetected NEOs.
Okay, so there's no explanation for that one. Okay. I'm sitting here waiting for an explanation that's not even coming. Yeah. So we're thinking some aurora thing, but geologically it doesn't make sense. And we're thinking the thruster light or fire from a space shuttle being launched, but then it's like there's 85 accounts of them, and the timing and trajectory seems off. Okay, weird case.
A rock big enough to flatten a city can slip past Earth, and sometimes we only spot it after it's already gone, or just hours before it would hit. That risk lives inside the category of near-Earth objects, or NEOs. As of December
Okay.
2024, astronomers had cataloged over 37,000 near-Earth asteroids, and the danger isn't abstract. Even just a 65-feet object can wreck a city area. The unnerving part is how often the smaller dangerous ones are spotted late. They're dim, fast, and hardest to see when they come from the sun's direction, because many searches rely on reflected sunlight and telescopes can't safely stare too close to the sun. On top of that, a
Okay.
dark asteroid reflects very little light, so a big dark rock can look like a small bright one. Space telescopes that look in infrared help because they detect an object's heat glow, not just reflected light, but even then some objects are harder to track than others. The ones that pass near Earth less often or move more faster during a close approach are harder to catch. There are crazy examples. Asteroid 4581 Asclepius missed Earth in 1989 by about 400,000 35,000 miles, but was discovered only after it had already passed. In 2008, asteroid 2008 TC3 was spotted just 20 hours before it detonated high above the Nubian Desert in Sudan. What brought even more attention to NEOs is the 2013 Chelyabinsk event. A previously unknown 65-feet asteroid exploded over Russia with hundreds of kilotons of energy and wasn't predicted in advance. Luckily, it's harder for this to happen with larger objects, but the small ones shouldn't be underestimated either, as we've seen. Oumuamua.
Interesting.
In
Okay, yeah,
October
what's this?
2017, astronomers in Hawaii spotted something really weird. They discovered a faint object moving so fast and on such an extreme path that it could not possibly be orbiting our sun. They named it Oumuamua, a Hawaiian word that roughly translates to a messenger from afar, and it became the first confirmed visitor ever detected from another star system. While most asteroids are round or lumpy, Oumuamua appeared to be violently stretched out. Data suggested it was either shaped like a long cigar or a flattened pancake. It was dark red, a color likely caused by millions of years of exposure to harsh cosmic radiation while it drifted through the void between stars. The true disturbance, though, began when scientists tracked its movement as it left our solar system. As Oumuamua passed the sun, it suddenly accelerated. In space, comets often speed up because heat from the sun causes them to shoot out jets of gas and dust, creating a visible tail that acts like a natural rocket engine. However, Oumuamua had no tail and no cloud of dust. It was completely dry and invisible to the naked eye. Yet, something was pushing it faster than the laws of gravity should allow. This unexplained propulsion combined with its artificial-looking shape led to intense speculation that we had just been visited by an alien spacecraft. The object was so strange that major scientific projects like Breakthrough Listen used massive radio telescopes to scan it for electronic signals, wondering if it was a probe or a piece of light sail technology sent by an advanced civilization to spy on us. However, the silence from the object was total. Just recently, in 2023, astronomers concluded that Oumuamua is likely a dark comet made of water ice that had been altered during its long journey in the freezing interstellar darkness. The theory explains that cosmic rays bombarded the ice for eons, trapping invisible hydrogen gas inside the frozen water. When the object finally got close to our sun, the heat released this trapped hydrogen. The gas shot out forcefully enough to push the object and make it accelerate, but because hydrogen is transparent, we could not see the tail. The Lost Cosmonauts recordings. Achille and Giovanni Battista, Giudica Cordiglia, two Italian brothers, set up their own experimental listening station called Torre Bert in the late 1950s, using scavenged equipment to spy on the space race. They successfully tracked famous satellites like Sputnik and Explorer 1, but they claimed they also found something much darker. For over 50 years, people have listened to their audio recordings, which supposedly capture the final moments of secret Soviet space missions that went horribly wrong. These are the voices of what are called the Phantom Cosmonauts. In May 1960, they said they heard a capsule veer off course and get lost in the void. In November of that same year, they picked up a faint SOS signal in Morse code from a spacecraft that was accidentally leaving Earth's orbit, drifting away into deep space forever. In February 1961, they recorded the sounds of a human gasping for air as they suffocated to death. Perhaps the most disturbing recording is from 1963, where an unnamed female cosmonaut supposedly cries out as her ship is burned during re-entry. This fueled a massive conspiracy theory that the Soviet Union was launching humans into space and covering up their deaths to avoid bad publicity. There were rumors about a pilot named Vladimir Ilyushin who allegedly launched days before Yuri Gagarin, but crashed in China and was held prisoner. It seemed like the Soviets were trying to erase their failures. However, after the fall of the Soviet Union, secret files were declassified, and they revealed that while there were tragic accidents on the ground, there were no lost cosmonauts in space. Experts who analyzed the brothers' recordings found major problems. The people speaking did not follow standard communication rules or military protocols. They made grammatical errors and their accents did not even sound Russian. The terrifying screams picked up were likely fakes or misunderstandings rather than the voices of the dead astronauts. False vacuum theory.
So what I'm hearing is, it's not Russians. I'm not saying it's aliens, but like, is it too hard to believe that during the space race, it wasn't just a race between Russians and America? Maybe China sent a shuttle up there, or Australia, or Brazil. I don't know. Something to think about.
The false vacuum theory says that the universe might not be totally stable. Picture the universe like a
Okay.
ball sitting in a shallow dip on a hillside. As long as it stays in that dip, everything's normal. But if something ever knocks it out, it could roll down into a lower dip that's even more stable. If that happened, a true vacuum bubble, a more stable state than the one we're in, would form and start spreading outward at light speed, basically rewriting the laws of physics as it expands. Anything caught inside would get
wait. What are you saying to me right now? There's like a vacuum, like a true vacuum can like just form and just shoot out at light speed, and it just rewrites all of physics. Is that what you're telling me right now? I'm already, you know, becoming terrified of the universe, and you're just it's like keep hammering nails into my coffin. What the hell?
A true vacuum bubble, a more stable state than the one we're in, would form and start spreading outward at light speed, basically rewriting the laws of physics as it expands. Anything caught inside would get wiped out, not because it's hit by something, but because the particles and forces that make matter work wouldn't act the same way anymore. And the unsettling part is, if a bubble like that started somewhere, we wouldn't get a warning, since it moves at the speed of light and you can't see it coming. The Pioneer Anomaly. You
Okay, I
probably
didn't
think
even
that
know
once a
that.
spacecraft is in deep space, it just floats forever in a straight line unless it hits something. However, something strange happened to two of the most famous explorers we ever sent out. In
Okay.
1972 and 1973, NASA launched Pioneer 10 and Pioneer 11. Their job was to fly past Jupiter and Saturn and send back pictures. After they finished their main missions, they kept flying into the deep darkness of the outer solar system. They entered a cruise phase where they were just drifting. They were spin stabilized, which means they spun around to keep steady like a top, and they rarely used their engines. As the
Okay.
years went by, people watching the data noticed something wrong. The spacecraft were slowing down. We know the sun pulls on everything with gravity, so they were supposed to slow down a little bit as they traveled outward. But they were slowing down too much. It was like an invisible hand was reaching out from the center of our system and dragging them back into the dark. This wasn't just a mistake or a glitch, as it was happening to both spacecraft at the same time. The mystery, which they called the Pioneer Anomaly, was noticed as early as 1980, but nobody really investigated it until 1994. Scientists started panicking a little. They checked everything to find what was dragging the ships back. Some people even thought it was connected to the expansion of the universe itself, or that time was flowing differently for the clocks on the spaceship compared to clocks on Earth. They called this clock acceleration, or distortion of time. They tried to look at other ships to see if they were being dragged back too. The Voyager spacecraft were out there, but they used their thrusters too often to keep steady, so they weren't usable for this measure. However, the Galileo and Ulysses missions hinted at a similar effect. Later, the Cassini spacecraft and the New Horizons probe going to Pluto also felt a similar mysterious push. It seemed like something fundamental about the universe was broken. For years, this remained one of the biggest mysteries in space exploration. However, the answer was finally found, and it wasn't aliens or broken gravity. It was heat. The spacecraft were powered by things called RTGs, which are basically hot nuclear batteries. These batteries release heat to stay cool. The spacecraft were designed in a way that the heat didn't fly off evenly in all directions. It turned out that the heat was bouncing off the back of the spacecraft's big antenna and pushing against it. Light and heat actually carry a tiny amount of push, called radiation pressure. Because more heat was shooting out one way than the other, the spacecraft was getting a tiny kick in the opposite direction. Apollo 10's unexplained music. Being on the far side of the moon is supposed to be one of the quietest places in existence. But for 3 astronauts in 1969, this wasn't the case. The crew of Apollo 10, Gene Cernan, John Young, and Tom Stafford, were on a mission to pave the way for the moon landing that would happen just a few months later. As they drifted behind the moon, they were completely cut off from Earth. For about an hour, they had no radio contact with mission control and nobody could see them. They were totally alone. But then, something strange started coming through their headsets. It was a weird whistling sound. It was so distinct that Cernan called it outer space type music. It wasn't just a short beep, but a long, droning noise that lasted for almost an hour. The astronauts were baffled. In the recordings, you can hear them asking each other if they heard that whistling sound. They agreed it was really weird. John Young even said that they would have to find out what it was, because nobody back home would believe them. It sounds sounds like the perfect proof of aliens trying to communicate, but the real answer has been known since the 1970s. The Apollo spacecraft was made of two parts, a command module and a lunar module. The eerie whistling was just radio interference between the VHF radios on these two vehicles. It is the same
Okay.
kind of annoying feedback you might hear with microphones and speakers on Earth. We know this is
Okay.
true because Michael Collins, the pilot for the famous Apollo 11 mission, wrote about it in his book way back in 1974. He said NASA technicians warned him about the noise before he flew. He even admitted that if they hadn't warned him, the noise would have scared the hell out of him. The sound only happened when the two radios were turned on and close to each other, and it stopped completely once the lunar module landed on the moon.
Okay.
The Tunguska event. On the morning of June 30th,
So they're gonna hear it again when they do the Artemis 4 moon landing or whatever. I don't know. All right. Last one.
1908, near the Podkamanaya Tunguska River, natives and Russian settlers saw a bluish light cross a clear sky, leaving a thin trail. Then came a flash, a swelling cloud, and a pillar of fire that threw a red glow over the landscape. Witnesses
Okay.
said it seemed to split, fade, and darken. About 10 minutes later, a roaring boom sound arrived, followed by repeated bursts and a shockwave strong enough to knock people down and smash windows hundreds of miles away. In the days after, night skies across parts of Asia and Europe were reported to glow unusually bright. This was an incredibly huge and sudden explosion. On the ground, the destruction was immense. Roughly 830 square miles of forest were leveled, and early accounts suggest up to 3 deaths. What made
Okay.
the event even stranger was what investigators didn't find. When serious fieldwork began, scientists expected a crater. In 1927, mineralogist Leonid Kulik reached the central zone and instead found an area where trees were scorched and stripped, but still standing upright, while trees farther out were knocked down away from the center. Later expeditions added traces pointing to material from space without fully settling every detail. Soil and tree resin contained chemistry often associated with meteorites, distributed as if scattered by an explosion. One of the most specific mysteries involved water. In 2007, researchers linked Lake Checo, about 5 miles from the estimated center of the blast, to the event, suggesting it could be a small impact crater made by a fragment of a meteor. Echo sounding described a conical lake bottom shape consistent with a structure that an impact would have caused. However, the idea remains disputed, with other work arguing the lake is older and unrelated. Despite the arguments around specific samples in Lake Checo, the main explanation is consistent. Tunguska was an airburst, an object from space that exploded in the air instead of forming a crater. It is often modeled as a stony asteroid tens of feet wide, breaking apart roughly 6 miles above the surface, releasing energy on the order of several dozen megatons of TNT.
Okay.
If you want to discuss this
Interesting.
video or suggest an idea for the next one, join my Discord.
Yeah, okay. Interesting space facts that'll blow your mind and make you terrified of the universe. But all in all, fun times, I guess. Very interesting. I didn't really have that many questions on that one. I was too busy being, I don't know, terrified. And yeah, I guess too busy being I was being too busy being terrified to figure out any questions, and I don't know.